Pause for a second, because what I'm about to share might clarify everything you've been experiencing lately. There is a shift unfolding in your life right now, quiet, almost invisible, but strong enough to alter everything. You didn't argue, you didn't plead, you didn't even announce it. You simply stopped chasing. And in that single decision, something deeper was set in motion. The person who once felt so certain of your presence is now standing in unfamiliar silence. The energy you used to offer so freely has disappeared. And now they can feel it, not as noise, but as absence. And absence carries a strange kind of power. It speaks directly to the parts of people they spend their entire lives trying to ignore. Right now, whether you can see it or not, they are thinking, questioning, feeling something they never anticipated. Because for the first time, they are experiencing you without your effort. And that changes everything. This is not about revenge. This is not about ego. This is about awareness. Welcome to Carl Jung Psychology, where silence reveals truth and distance exposes what words never could. If you've been through this, or you're living it right now, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week on this channel, we go deeper into the psychology of human behavior and why the unconscious drives everything. This video is going to explain something that most people feel but never fully understand. When you stop chasing someone, the shift that occurs is not loud or obvious at first, but it is profoundly psychological. Before this moment, the connection was being sustained entirely by your effort. Your messages, your attention, your emotional availability were constantly moving toward them, generating a kind of one-sided momentum. This momentum placed them in a position of comfort where they didn't have to question much, didn't have to decide decisively, and didn't have to fully confront their own feelings. They could simply exist within the connection without contributing equally because your energy was filling every gap. The moment you stop chasing, that entire structure collapses. Not because you created drama, but because you withdrew the force that was holding everything in motion. What once felt stable to them now feels uncertain. And uncertainty is something the human mind is fundamentally uncomfortable with. When a pattern is broken, especially one that has been consistent, the brain immediately attempts to understand why. This is where the quiet shift in power begins. Before, their attention was passive. They received without needing to give. Now, without your presence pushing toward them, their attention becomes active. They begin to notice the absence in ways they never noticed the presence. This occurs because people often become more aware of what is missing than what is consistently available. Your silence starts to carry weight, not because silence itself is inherently powerful, but because it interrupts expectation. They anticipated you reaching out, showing up, continuing as you always had. When that expectation goes unmet, it creates a psychological gap. Inside that gap, questions begin to form. They may not acknowledge these questions consciously, but internally, there is a shift. They start to revisit interactions, analyze small details, and wonder if something has changed. This is not always about missing you immediately. It is about the disruption of certainty. Human beings are deeply attached to patterns, especially emotional ones. When you remove your part in that pattern, it forces the other person into a position they were not prepared for. This is where the balance of emotional investment starts to equalize. Previously, you were contributing more, and they were benefiting from that imbalance. Now, with your withdrawal, the imbalance becomes visible. They can no longer ignore it because they are no longer being carried by your effort. The connection now demands something from them, and that requirement can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. At a deeper level, this shift also touches the ego. When someone is accustomed to being pursued, it reinforces a sense of control and validation. Your attention served as a mirror, reflecting their importance back to them. When you stop chasing, that mirror is suddenly taken away. This does not necessarily make them feel less valuable, but it does make them question the source of that validation. They may begin to wonder if they misjudged the situation, if they took something for granted, or if they are losing something they assumed would always be there. The absence of your pursuit also creates space for emotional clarity. When you are constantly present, your energy may have obscured their genuine feelings. They didn't need to define how they felt because your actions were enough to sustain the connection. Now, without that external input, they are left alone with their internal state. This can lead to a recognition of real feelings, or it can expose a lack of depth that was previously hidden. Another critical aspect of this shift is that it removes pressure from you and transfers it to them. Before, you were the one striving to move things forward, working to get a response, working to maintain the dynamic. Now that responsibility no longer belongs to you. The silence positions them where they must decide whether to step forward or remain still. And that decision becomes far more significant because it is no longer being shaped by your constant presence. What makes this shift so compelling is that it is not forced. You are not demanding attention, not requesting explanations, not generating emotional tension through confrontation. Instead, you are allowing the natural dynamics of the situation to reveal themselves. Without your effort sustaining the connection, what remains is the truth of how much the other person is genuinely willing to invest. If you are still watching this, you are already part of the rare few who are willing to face what most people spend their entire lives running from. 97% of people scroll past content like this, not because it does not reach them, but because it reaches them too deeply. If this is already moving something inside you, subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology right now and turn on notifications. What you are about to hear does not just explain why stopping the chase rewires the entire psychological dynamic. It will permanently change how you see yourself. Silence has a way of accomplishing what words often fail to achieve. When you step back and stop filling every gap with conversation, reassurance, or presence, you create a space that did not exist before. In that space, the other person is no longer being guided by your energy. They are left alone with their own thoughts. And this is where reflection begins, whether they intend for it to or not. Before this silence, their experience of the connection was shaped largely by your actions. You reached out. You maintained contact. You made your interest known. Because of that, they didn't have to search within themselves for answers. Your presence acted as a constant signal, something predictable and stable. But when that signal disappears, even quietly, the mind reacts.
It notices the absence not as emptiness, but as something that requires understanding. At first, the silence can feel disorienting. They may check their phone more often than usual, not necessarily because they expect something specific, but because something feels off. The pattern they relied on has been interrupted. Human beings are deeply wired to recognize patterns, especially in relationships. When a pattern breaks, the brain begins to ask, why? This questioning is the beginning of genuine reflection. As time passes, the silence grows more significant. It is no longer just a brief pause. It starts to feel deliberate,
even if you never declared it as such. This perception matters because intention carries meaning. They may begin to wonder if they did something wrong, if something shifted within you, or if the connection itself is fading. These thoughts are not always rational, but they are emotional responses to uncertainty. In this state, the mind begins to revisit the past. Small interactions that once seemed ordinary are re-examined. Conversations, tones, timing, even moments of hesitation are replayed internally. This is not because they suddenly became deeply analytical, but because the silence has removed distraction. Without new input from you, the only material available is what has already happened. Reflection feeds on memory, and memory becomes more vivid when it is all that remains. This process can surface emotions that were previously suppressed or unacknowledged. When everything was active and ongoing, there was no need to pause and feel deeply. The flow of interaction kept things moving, but silence slows everything down. It forces stillness, and in stillness, emotions rise more clearly. They may begin to feel a sense of loss, even if they cannot fully identify what they are losing. They may feel curiosity, a need to understand what changed. In some cases, there may even be a quiet sense of regret, particularly if they realize they did not fully value your presence when it was consistent. Silence also removes external validation. When you were present, your attention may have reassured them, consciously or unconsciously, that everything was fine. Your messages, your effort, your reliability created a sense of security. Without that, they no longer have immediate confirmation of where they stand. This absence of validation turns them inward. Instead of relying on you to define the connection, they must begin to define it for themselves. What makes silence particularly powerful is that it does not demand a response. There is no direct question to answer, no confrontation to react to. This absence of pressure can make the reflection more genuine. When people are confronted directly, they often respond defensively or impulsively, but silence gives them time. It allows their thoughts to develop without interference, which can lead to a more honest understanding of their own feelings. At the same time, silence can generate discomfort. Not everyone is at ease being alone with their thoughts, especially when those thoughts involve uncertainty or emotional ambiguity. Some may attempt to distract themselves, filling their time with other activities to avoid going too deep. But even then, the awareness of the silence persists in the background. It does not dissolve completely. It lingers, waiting to be acknowledged. This lingering effect is what keeps the reflection alive. It is not a single realization, but a continuing process. Each moment without contact reinforces the awareness that something has shifted, and each reinforcement adds weight to their thoughts. Over time, this can lead to a clearer understanding of what your presence truly meant to them, not because you explained it, but because they experienced its absence. In the end, silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back to them what was once concealed by constant interaction. Without your voice, they begin to hear their own more clearly. Without your presence, they begin to understand what that presence represented. If this is speaking to something you've felt but couldn't put into words, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology and turn on the notification bell. We release new content every week that goes into the psychological depths most channels won't explore. Absence has a distinctive way of revealing emotional depth that constant presence often conceals. When someone is always there, available, responsive, dependable, the mind gradually normalizes that presence. It becomes part of the background rather than something consciously valued. This is not because the connection lacks meaning, but because familiarity reduces urgency. What is always accessible rarely feels at risk. And without a sense of risk, emotions tend to remain unexamined. When absence enters, that sense of certainty is disrupted. What was once predictable is no longer guaranteed. This forces the mind to shift from passive acceptance to active awareness. The person who once moved through the connection without much thought now begins to notice what is no longer there. It is not just about missing messages or interactions. It is about the sudden recognition that something meaningful has been withdrawn from their experience. This recognition does not always arrive immediately. At first, absence can feel like a simple break in routine, but as time continues, its weight increases. The spaces where your presence once existed begin to feel more defined. Moments that were once filled with interaction now feel quieter, and that quiet carries a different kind of awareness. It is in this awareness that emotions begin to surface more clearly. Presence often provides comfort, but it can also create a kind of emotional buffer. When someone knows you are there, they do not feel the urgency to fully process what you mean to them. Your availability acts as reassurance, allowing them to postpone deeper reflection. Absence removes that buffer. Without immediate access to you, they can no longer rely on interaction to sustain the connection. Instead, they must rely on their internal sense of what the connection represents. This internal shift is where depth begins to take form. Feelings that were once vague or undefined start to sharpen. They may begin to recognize patterns they previously dismissed, how often they thought about you, how they felt after conversations, how your presence shaped their emotional state. These realizations are not manufactured by absence, but absence makes them visible. It strips away distraction and leaves only what is genuinely felt. Another dimension of absence is that it introduces the possibility of loss. When someone is consistently present, the idea of losing them does not feel immediate or real. But when they are no longer there in the same way, that possibility becomes more tangible. The mind begins to consider what it would mean if the absence were permanent. This can intensify emotions, not because something dramatic has occurred, but because the value of what was there becomes clearer through its potential disappearance. This process also shapes memory. In absence, the mind tends to return to past experiences with greater attention. Moments that may have seemed unremarkable at the time can take on new significance. The way you spoke, the way you showed up, the consistency you offered. These details become more noticeable when they are no longer being created in real time. Memory fills the gap left by absence, and in doing so, it often highlights the emotional impact of what was once present. Absence also removes the influence of immediate interaction, which can sometimes distort perception. When people are actively engaging, their responses are often shaped by the moment, by mood, by circumstance, by distraction. But without ongoing interaction, those external influences fade, and what remains is a more stable internal understanding of how they feel. This can lead to a more honest assessment of the connection, one that is not dependent on temporary emotions or situational factors. In many cases, absence does not generate new feelings, but reveals existing ones that were never fully acknowledged. It brings clarity by removing noise. What was once taken for granted becomes something to reconsider, and what was once unclear becomes more defined through the simple act of no longer being there. When the pattern shifts and you are no longer chasing, the other person often enters an emotionally unsettled state, even if they conceal it outwardly. The first reaction is rarely direct or clear. Instead, it tends to appear as a blend of confusion, curiosity, and a subtle form of anxiety. These responses do not arrive all at once, but they gradually build as the absence of your usual behavior becomes more apparent. Confusion is typically the starting point. They were accustomed to a certain rhythm, a predictable flow where you reached out, showed interest, and sustained the connection. That rhythm created a sense of stability, even if they were not fully conscious of it. When that stability disappears, the mind struggles to process the change. They may ask themselves persistent questions. Why did this behavior shift? What triggered it? And whether it reflects something they did or something that changed in you. This confusion is not only about the situation itself, it is about the loss of certainty they once had. As confusion lingers, curiosity begins to develop. The human mind naturally seeks to resolve uncertainty, and curiosity becomes the instrument for that search. They may start paying closer attention to small details, looking for signals or clues that explain your silence. This could involve reviewing your activity, reflecting on past exchanges, or reinterpreting things that previously seemed insignificant. Curiosity pulls their focus toward you in a way that did not exist before, because now there is something unresolved that needs to be understood. Alongside curiosity, there is often a quiet rise in anxiety. This does not always appear as obvious worry, but more as an underlying tension. The absence of your attention removes a source of reassurance they may not have consciously recognized. When that reassurance is gone, the mind begins to consider possibilities it previously avoided. They may wonder if they are losing your interest, if the connection is fading, or if they have been replaced. These thoughts can create a sense of unease, even if they attempt to dismiss them. This anxiety is closely tied to the loss of control. When you were chasing, they held a certain level of influence over the dynamic. They could decide when to respond, how much effort to offer, and how engaged they chose to be, knowing your presence would remain steady. When you stop, that sense of control weakens. They can no longer predict your behavior in the same way, and unpredictability tends to produce discomfort. The mind favors what it can anticipate, and your silence disrupts that preference. Another layer of this reaction is the effect on their self-perception. Your attention may have served as a form of validation, reinforcing their sense of importance within the connection. When that attention is no longer present, they may begin to question that sense of importance. This does not always manifest as immediate insecurity, but it creates a subtle shift in how they perceive themselves in relation to you. They may start to wonder if they misread your feelings, or if they overestimated their position in your life. At the same time, these emotional reactions can produce internal conflict. Part of them may want to reach out and resolve the uncertainty, while another part may hold back due to pride, fear, or a desire to preserve their earlier position. This tension deepens the feelings of confusion and anxiety because there is no clear direction for action. They are caught between wanting clarity and avoiding vulnerability. Confusion keeps them questioning what changed and why. Curiosity pulls them toward answers. Anxiety makes them more attuned to any signal that confirms their fears. Together, these emotions create a state where they are more mentally and emotionally engaged with the situation than they ever were when everything was predictable. What makes this phase significant is that it moves their role from passive to active, at least internally. They are no longer simply receiving your attention. They are processing, questioning, and feeling the weight of its absence. Even if they do not act immediately, their internal state is no longer neutral. It has been activated by the change in your behavior. When your energy is no longer constantly directed toward them, something subtle but important takes place. They are left without the external force that once shaped their experience of the connection. Before, your attention, effort, and emotional presence acted almost like a guide. It kept things moving, bridged gaps, and often made it easier for them to remain in a passive role. They didn't need to examine themselves deeply, because your actions were already providing answers on the surface. Once that energy is removed, they are no longer being sustained by your consistency. The connection, instead of being maintained by you, becomes something they must face on their own terms. This is where a deeper kind of confrontation begins. Not dramatic or external, but internal. They are left alone with their own thoughts, reactions, and emotional patterns without your presence softening or distracting from them. At first, this can feel unfamiliar. When someone is accustomed to receiving attention without needing to reciprocate equally, they settle comfortably into that imbalance. Your effort may have allowed them to avoid making clear decisions about how they truly feel. They could remain in a space of ambiguity, neither fully committing nor fully letting go. But without your energy sustaining that space, ambiguity becomes harder to maintain. They begin to notice their own behavior more honestly. How often did they initiate? How much effort did they genuinely offer? These questions may not surface in direct words, but they appear as a quiet awareness. The absence of your presence acts like a mirror, reflecting their own level of investment back to them. This reflection can be uncomfortable, especially if it reveals a gap between what they felt and how they actually behaved. At a deeper level, they are forced to confront their emotional truth. When you were present, your energy may have shaped how they felt in the moment. Your attention could generate warmth, connection, or even attachment. But those feelings were partly sustained by your actions. Without that external input, they must rely on what remains internally. This is where clarity begins to form. If their feelings were genuine and deeper than they realized, your absence can bring that truth to the surface. They may begin to feel a stronger sense of missing you, not just out of habit, but as a person. They may recognize the emotional impact you had on their life in a way they didn't fully comprehend before. This realization does not come from you explaining it, but from them experiencing the contrast between having you present and not. On the other hand, if their feelings were shallow or dependent on your effort, that truth also becomes apparent. Without your energy sustaining the connection, the emotional intensity may fade rather than grow. This can be a difficult realization because it forces them to see that what they experienced was not as substantial as they may have believed. In this way, your absence does not create new feelings, it exposes what was already there. Another significant aspect of this process is that it eliminates distraction. When you were actively engaging, their attention was partly occupied by responding, interacting, and maintaining the flow. Now, without that ongoing exchange, there is more mental space. That space can no longer be filled by your presence, so it is filled by their own thoughts. And those thoughts tend to return to the same question in different forms. What does this connection actually mean to me? This question demands honesty. There is no immediate response from you to shape their thinking. No reassurance to sidestep the deeper issue. They are left with themselves, and that can lead to a more genuine understanding of their emotions, even if that understanding takes time to fully surface. At the same time, this confrontation is not always comfortable. Some people resist it. They may seek distraction, avoid going too deep, or minimize the significance of the connection to protect themselves from discomfort. But even in avoidance, the awareness remains. The absence you created continues to exist, and with it, the quiet pressure to acknowledge what they truly feel. What happens next is not determined by the situation alone, but by the inner structure of the person facing it. When your absence creates space, that space calls for a response. But the nature of that response depends entirely on their level of emotional maturity. This is where the difference between reaction and genuine awareness becomes clear. A person with emotional maturity does not simply react to discomfort. They try to understand it. When they feel the shift created by your absence, they don't immediately escape it or dismiss it. Instead, they look inward. They recognize that something has changed, and rather than assigning blame or forming assumptions, they become curious about their own feelings. This curiosity is not surface level. It leads them to examine their past behavior, their reluctance to act, and the role they played in the dynamic. They may realize they relied too heavily on your effort, or that they avoided making clear choices when the opportunity was there. This awareness can bring a sense of accountability. Instead of focusing on what they lost, they begin to understand what they did or didn't contribute. This shift moves them from a passive role into an active one. From this place, their actions tend to be intentional. If they value the connection, they will move toward it with clarity. They won't reach out impulsively just to end the silence. They will reach out with purpose. Their communication may feel different, more direct, more honest, less dependent on you carrying the dynamic. On the other hand, a person who lacks emotional maturity responds differently. The same absence that creates reflection in one person can create avoidance in another. Instead of looking inward, they look for ways to escape the discomfort. They may distract themselves, redirect their attention, or convince themselves that the situation simply does not matter. This is not because they feel nothing, but because confronting their emotions feels overwhelming or unfamiliar. In some cases, they may interpret your absence as rejection and respond defensively. Rather than asking what changed, they may arrive at negative conclusions and protect themselves by pulling further away. This creates a cycle where distance produces more distance, not because the connection held no value, but because they are not equipped to handle the vulnerability required to address it. There is also a tendency in less mature responses to focus on control rather than understanding. They may wait for you to return to your previous behavior, expecting the dynamic to reset without them needing to change anything. This waiting is not calm. It is rooted in resistance. They resist the idea that they need to take initiative or examine their own role. So they remain in place, even if it means allowing the connection to dissolve entirely. What becomes clear through this process is that your absence functions as a kind of test, not one you designed deliberately, but one that naturally emerges from the situation. It reveals whether the other person is capable of growth or whether they remain bound to their existing patterns. Before we close, here is something worth reflecting on. Carl Jung devoted his life to the study of synchronicity, the idea that certain moments carry a meaning far deeper than coincidence. If this video has reached you at precisely the right time in your life, leave a number in the comments that feels significant to you right now. It could be 11, 777, 528, or any number that resonates with where you are on your journey. Jung believed that when we begin to notice meaningful patterns in our choices, in our timing, in the moments that speak to us, we are beginning to wake up to something real. Your number in the comments might be exactly the signal someone else needs to see today. In the end, nothing truly changed except your energy. You stopped chasing, and in doing so, you allowed the truth to rise to the surface. What was once obscured behind effort, consistency, and presence is now visible in its pure form. Their reaction, their silence, or their action, whatever comes next, is not something you control, and it was never meant to be. It is simply a reflection of who they are when they are no longer being carried by you. Some will rise to meet the moment, stepping forward with clarity and intention. Others will remain where they are, unable to move past their own limitations. But in both cases, the outcome serves the same purpose. It reveals what is real and what is not. You are no longer chasing an answer because the answer is now unfolding on its own. And that is where your power truly lies. Not in pursuing, not in convincing, but in allowing. Allowing people to show you who they are. Allowing space to bring clarity. Allowing yourself to move forward without needing to force anything into place. Because what is meant to meet you will move toward you, and what is not will quietly fall away. If this video opened something in you, something you've been carrying but couldn't name, Subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology and come back next week. We go into these psychological depths every single week because the most important journey you will ever take is the one inward. Leave a comment below and tell us, what did you feel the moment you stopped chasing? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Good luck on your journey. May you choose your peace over confusion and your self-worth over uncertainty. Thank you for being here and for allowing these words to reach you.